Hello and welcome. Find a comfortable position. Allow your body to feel heavy, supported and at ease. There is nothing for you to do right now but to listen, to wonder and to drift. This journey we are about to embark on is one of curiosity, designed to quiet the mind and gently guide you toward a state of peaceful rest. Think of this not as a lecture to be memorized, but as a gentle stream of information flowing around you as you float toward sleep. Before we delve into the deep green world of our silent companions, I have a small unrelated question for you, a little thought to set our minds adrift in the cosmos before we ground ourselves in the soil. Of all the planets in our solar system, or any you can imagine, which is your favorite? Is it the steadfast ringed beauty of Saturn, the fiery mystery of Mars, or perhaps the distant icy solitude of Neptune? There is no right answer. Just hold that thought, that image of a world spinning in the quiet dark, as we begin our exploration here on our own beautiful living planet. Tonight, we are here to ask a question that feels both simple and impossibly complex. Can plants feel pain? Let this question not be a source of anxiety, but one of wonder. We will explore it together gently, section by section, allowing the science and the philosophy to be a lullaby for the curious mind. Let my voice be your guide, and let the incredible world of botany be your passage into dreams. Breathe in and out. Let's begin. To truly begin our inquiry, we must first build a common foundation. We must, for a moment, turn our gaze inward and define the very concept we are questioning: pain. For us, as humans, pain is a multifaceted experience. It is not a single simple event. It is a symphony, or perhaps more accurately, a cacophony, composed of two distinct and vital parts. The first part is called nociception. It is a word that sounds complex, but its meaning is beautifully straightforward. It is the raw biological process. Imagine you touch a hot stove. Specialized nerve endings in your skin, called nociceptors, detect the potentially damaging heat. They are like tiny, silent alarms. Instantly, they send an electrical signal, a message of pure data that screams up your arm, through your spinal cord, and into the brain. This is nociception. It is the physical, objective detection of a harmful stimulus. A reflex can even happen at this stage. Your hand might pull back from the stove before your brain has even fully processed what has happened. It is the body's magnificent hardwired system for self-preservation. It is purely mechanical, a cascade of electrochemical reactions. But that is only half of the story, isn't it? The second part is where the experience truly becomes pain. This part is the subjective emotional experience. When that signal from the nociceptors arrives in the brain, it doesn't just go to one place. It is routed to multiple areas, including the limbic system, the seat of our emotions. Here, that raw data of excessive heat is interpreted. It is colored with fear, with panic, with the memory of past burns, with the anxiety of future injury. It becomes suffering. It becomes the feeling of pain, the ouch, that is so much more than just a signal. This emotional, conscious experience is what we truly mean when we say something hurts. It requires a brain, a centralized processing unit capable of consciousness, self-awareness, and emotion. It is the difference between a simple sensor detecting an error and a person experiencing anguish. So when we ask if a plant can feel pain, we are truly asking two separate, though deeply intertwined, questions. First, can a plant detect harmful stimuli? Does it have a form of nociception? And second, the far more profound and difficult question, can a plant have a subjective emotional experience of that stimulus? Does it suffer? Keep this distinction in your mind as we journey forward. The signal and the feeling, the detection and the experience. Let this thought cradle you as you relax even further. Now let us turn our attention to the green kingdom. Plants, as you know, do not have brains. They do not have a central nervous system, nerve endings, or the nociceptors we just discussed. On the surface, it would seem the conversation ends here. No brain, no pain. But the story of biology is rarely so simple and often far more elegant. While plants lack the hardware we associate with sensation, they have evolved their own, equally sophisticated systems for detecting harm. They have, in a very real sense, their own version of nociception. When a leaf is torn or chewed by an insect or scorched by the sun, a cascade of events is triggered at the site of the injury. The plant knows it has been damaged. The very act of a cell wall being broken releases a flood of internal chemicals, signals that were meant to be contained. This sudden release is the first alarm. But it goes deeper. The plant begins to actively produce and transmit distress signals. One of the most well-studied of these is a wave of calcium ions. Imagine the wound site as a stone dropped into a still pond. A wave of calcium ions propagates outwards from the damaged cells, moving through the plant's vascular system, its internal plumbing, spreading the message. Damage has occurred here. This signal travels remarkably fast, in some cases centimeters per minute, alerting distant parts of the plant to the localized threat. Furthermore, plants utilize electrical signals. Yes, you heard that correctly. While not identical to our nerve impulses, researchers have measured distinct electrical waves, called action potentials, that travel through the plant's tissues, originating from a point of injury. When a leaf is wounded, a spike in electrical activity can be observed moving away from the site, carrying information. This is not just a random byproduct of damage. It is a structured, repeatable signal. It is a form of biological Morse code, a silent, internal scream. The plant, through this combination of chemical and electrical communication, is demonstrating a clear and complex system of damage detection. It is aware on a physiological level that its body has been compromised. So, to our first question, can a plant detect harmful stimuli? The answer is a resounding yes. It is an unequivocal demonstration of a decentralized, plant-based form of nociception. But does this awareness constitute feeling? Is this elegant, silent alarm system the same as the subjective agony of pain? This is the boundary we must now explore. Ponder this silent, internal world as you continue to relax, to let go. Let us drift away from the idea of injury for a moment and consider a gentler sense, the sense of touch. For us, touch is a source of information, comfort and warning. For a plant, it is a fundamental way of navigating and interacting with its physical world. This response to touch is called thigmotropism. It is the plant's innate ability to alter its growth pattern in response to physical contact. The most classic and beautiful example is the climbing vine. A tendril of a pea plant or a grapevine extends into the air, growing in a slow circular motion called circumnutation, almost as if it is searching. When it brushes against a solid object, a fence post, another plant, a garden trellis, a remarkable transformation occurs. The cells on the side of the tendril making contact are stimulated. This touch signal, much like a damage signal, triggers a complex hormonal and cellular response. The plant hormones, particularly auxin, are redistributed. The cells on the side touching the object slow their growth, while the cells on the opposite side are stimulated to elongate and grow faster. This differential growth rate causes the tendril to bend and curl, wrapping itself securely around the object it has found. It is a slow, deliberate, and incredibly precise action. The plant is not just bumping into things. It is actively seeking, finding, and utilizing support to climb towards the life-giving sun. Is this just a simple mechanical reflex? Or is it a form of primitive intention? What does it mean to seek without a mind? This sensitivity can be astonishingly refined. The Venus flytrap, for instance, has tiny trigger hairs inside its jaw-like leaves. It can distinguish between the random landing of a raindrop and the delicate footsteps of an insect. To avoid false alarms, it requires 2 separate touches of its trigger hairs in quick succession before it will snap shut. It is a plant that can count. Similarly, the Mimosa pudica, or the touch-me-not plant, dramatically folds its leaves inward upon the slightest touch. This is achieved through a rapid change in water pressure in specialized structures at the base of the leaves called pulvini. The touch triggers an electrical signal that causes these cells to expel water, making them go limp and causing the leaf to collapse. While this is likely a defense mechanism to startle herbivores, it presents us with an undeniable truth. The plant is exquisitely aware of its physical surroundings. It feels the wind, the rain, the gentle crawl of an insect, the presence of a supportive structure. It lives in a rich, tactile world that we often overlook. As you lie still, become aware of the points of contact your own body is making, the gentle pressure of the surface beneath you, the soft touch of fabric on your skin. Imagine experiencing that, not as a fleeting sensation, but as the very guide for your growth and direction. Now, let's consider a sense that we often think of as uniquely animalian, the sense of sight. Plants do not have eyes, of course, not in any way we would recognize, but they can see their world with a level of sophistication that is, frankly, breathtaking. They are masters of photoreception, the ability to perceive and respond to light. Their entire existence, driven by photosynthesis, depends on it. They can detect the direction of light, its intensity, its color, and even its duration. This vision is made possible by a suite of specialized photoreceptor proteins. Let's meet two of the most important ones. The first are the phototropins. These proteins are sensitive to blue light. They are the reason a houseplant on a windowsill will bend and grow towards the window. When blue light strikes one side of a plant's stem, the phototropins on that side are activated. This activation triggers a signal that causes the growth hormone auxin to migrate to the shaded side of the stem. The higher concentration of auxin on the shady side causes those cells to elongate more rapidly than the cells on the sunny side, and this differential growth physically bends the plant towards the light source. It is a simple, elegant mechanism for an incredibly complex goal, maximizing its access to the energy it needs to live. The second set of photoreceptors are the phytochromes. These are even more remarkable. Phytochromes are sensitive to red and far-red light. Think of them as a biological switch. When they are exposed to the red light abundant in direct sunlight, they switch to an on state. When they are exposed to the far-red light that dominates in shaded conditions, because the chlorophyll in the leaves above has absorbed most of the red light, they switch to an off state. This simple on-off switch allows a plant to know, with incredible precision, its light environment. It can tell if it is in direct sun or if it is being shaded by a neighboring plant. This information is critical. A seedling in the shade of a larger plant will use this far-red light signal to trigger a shade avoidance response, causing it to grow tall and spindly very quickly in a desperate race to reach the unfiltered sunlight above. Phytochromes also allow plants to measure the length of the day. As the days grow shorter in autumn, the long period of darkness allows the phytochrome to remain in its off state for longer, triggering responses like dropping leaves or entering dormancy. Conversely, the lengthening days of spring trigger germination and flowering. They are, in essence, the keepers of the plant's calendar. So, while they do not see shapes or images, plants possess a rich and detailed view of their world. They see the coming of dawn, the passing of a cloud, the shadow of arrival, and the changing of the seasons. Is this awareness of light, so fundamental to its being, a form of plant consciousness, a silent, photosynthetic consciousness? Relax into that thought. Let's now move into a truly fascinating realm, one that blurs the line between an individual plant and a community. Let us explore the plant's sense of smell. Again, they do not have noses or olfactory receptors in the way we do, but they are constantly communicating and perceiving their world through the release and detection of airborne chemicals known as volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Every scent you have ever associated with the plant world, the perfume of a rose, the fresh smell of pine in a forest, the sharp aroma of mint, is a complex chemical message. These are the words of the plant's language. One of the most dramatic examples of this is the smell of freshly cut grass. To us, it is a pleasant summery scent. To the grass, it is a cry of alarm. When the blades of grass are severed, they release a specific cocktail of VOCs. This chemical cloud is a distress signal, and it serves two purposes. First, it can attract beneficial insects. For example, some plants, when being eaten by a caterpillar, will release VOCs that act as a beacon for parasitic wasps. These wasps are the natural predators of the caterpillar. The plant is essentially calling for bodyguards. It is an incredible act of interspecies communication and defense. The second, and perhaps more profound, purpose is to warn its neighbors. Other plants, even those of different species, can smell these distress signals. When the VOCs from a wounded plant land on the leaves of a nearby healthy plant, they are absorbed and recognized. The receiving plant, now alerted to a potential threat in the area, can begin to preemptively bolster its own defenses before it is ever attacked. It might start producing bitter-tasting tannins or toxic compounds in its leaves to make itself less palatable to herbivores. This is a community-wide defense system, a silent chemical conversation about shared threats. A sagebrush plant being nibbled by a deer can warn a wild tobacco plant downwind. A lima bean plant infested with spider mites can alert its uninfested neighbors to prepare for invasion. The entire ecosystem is connected by this invisible web of information. So what does this mean for our understanding of a plant? It is not a solitary, isolated organism. It is a member of a community, constantly gossiping, warning, and listening. If a plant can cry for help, and another can hear that cry and react, where does one organism end and the other begin? Is the forest itself a single superorganism, breathing in a shared language of chemical whispers? Breathe in deeply, and as you breathe out, imagine you can sense these ancient, invisible conversations happening all around you. We have explored how a plant touches, sees, and smells. Now, let us journey downward into the cool, dark, and silent world beneath the soil. Let's explore the plant's sense of taste. The tongue of a plant is its intricate and ever-expanding root system. Roots are not just passive straws, mindlessly sucking up water. They are incredibly dynamic and intelligent foraging organs, capable of tasting and assessing the soil with remarkable sensitivity. This ability is called chemotropism, the growth of an organism in response to a chemical stimulus. A plant's roots are on a constant quest for a very specific diet: water, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and a host of other micronutrients. The soil, however, is not a uniform soup. It is a patchy, heterogeneous environment. Nutrients are often found in concentrated pockets, while other areas may be barren or even contain toxic elements like heavy metals. The root system must navigate this complex chemical landscape. The very tip of each growing root is a marvel of sensory biology. It can detect concentration gradients of dozens of different chemical compounds simultaneously. When a root tip senses a rich source of nitrates, for instance, it will signal the root to grow and branch out profusely in that direction, to fully exploit the bounty. Conversely, if it detects a high concentration of something harmful, like aluminum salts which can be toxic to plants, it will actively steer its growth away from that area. This is a decentralized, problem-solving intelligence of the highest order. The entire root system, which can be vastly larger than the visible part of the plant above ground, acts as a collective brain. Billions of tiny root tips are all making individual decisions about which way to grow, based on the chemical taste of their immediate surroundings. The sum of all these local decisions results in an incredibly efficient and resilient foraging strategy for the plant as a whole. Furthermore, this sense of taste extends to communication. Roots can release chemical exudates into the soil, signals that can be tasted by the roots of other plants. Some plants use this to wage a form of chemical warfare, releasing compounds that inhibit the growth of nearby competitors, a phenomenon known as allelopathy. The black walnut tree is a famous example. releasing a chemical called juglone that is toxic to many other plants, effectively carving out its own territory. So the world beneath our feet is not a quiet one. It is a dynamic environment of taste, of seeking and avoiding, of competition and silent chemical shouting matches. Is this constant chemical analysis of its environment a form of thought? A slow, deliberate, underground cognition? Let your mind sink down into that dark, rich and sensing world. We now arrive at what might be the most subtle and debated of the plant senses, the sense of hearing. Do plants have ears? No. But can they perceive and respond to sound? The evidence is beginning to suggest that they can, not as sound in the way we process it, but as physical vibrations. The world, after all, is a vibrating place. Sound is simply the movement of pressure waves through a medium like air or water. For a plant, which is physically connected to the soil and surrounded by air, it is constantly being vibrated. The question is, can it distinguish meaningful vibrations from random noise? Pioneering research in this area has yielded some astonishing results. In one study, scientists recorded the specific minute vibrations that a caterpillar's chewing creates as it eats a leaf. They then played back this recording to a group of plants that had never been attacked. A second group of plants was exposed to silence, and a third to vibrations of a different frequency, like wind or the chirping of an insect. The results were incredible. The plants that were exposed to the chewing vibrations began to ramp up their production of defensive chemicals, the same kind they would produce if they were actually being eaten. The plants exposed to silence or other vibrations did not. This demonstrates that the plants were not just reacting to any vibration. They could specifically recognize the vibrational signature of a threat and respond accordingly. They could hear their predator. Other studies have suggested that plant roots can sense the vibrations of running water and will direct their growth towards the source, even if there is no difference in soil moisture. It is a form of acoustic navigation. The mechanism for this sense is still being investigated, but it is likely related to mechanoreceptor proteins in the plant's cells, which are sensitive to stretching and pressure. These proteins can convert a physical vibration into a chemical or electrical signal, just as our own eardrums and inner ear bones do. So, the forest may not just be a world of silent chemical conversations, but also one filled with a symphony of vibrations that we cannot perceive. The hum of a bee's wings, the patter of rain, the gnawing of a beetle, the flow of water underground, all of these might be meaningful signals in the sensory world of a plant. What would it be like to feel the world in this way? To experience the sound of an approaching threat as a shiver running through your own leaves and stem. As you settle, listen to the subtle sounds around you. The hum of a fan, the creak of a floorboard, the distant sound of traffic. Imagine those sounds not as noises, but as tangible feelings, as vibrations on your own skin. We have spoken of the ways individual plants sense their world. Now, let us expand our focus and delve into one of the most profound discoveries in modern biology, a discovery that has utterly transformed our understanding of a forest. It is the concept of the mycorrhizal network, often poetically referred to as the wood wide web. This is not the work of plants alone, but a symbiotic partnership between plant roots and vast underground networks of fungi. The fungi, with their web of tiny threads called mycelium, are far more efficient at exploring the soil and absorbing nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen than plant roots are. The plants, in turn, being masters of photosynthesis, create sugars and carbon. In a beautiful act of biological trade, the plants provide the fungi with these energy-rich sugars, and in return, the fungi act as an extension of the plant's root system, delivering water and vital nutrients. But this network is not just a simple pipeline for food. It is an information superhighway. The mycelial threads connect not just one fungus to one tree, but form a massive shared network linking dozens or even hundreds of trees and plants in a forest, often of many different species. Through this subterranean network, plants can communicate and cooperate in ways that were once thought impossible. A mother tree, a large, well-established tree in the forest, can use the network to send excess carbon and nutrients to shaded seedlings, including its own offspring, giving them a better chance at survival. It is a form of parental care, a nurturing of the next generation. The network also transmits warning signals. If one tree is attacked by a pest or disease, it can send out specific chemical distress signals through the mycorrhizal network to its neighbors. The connected trees receive this warning and can mount their own defenses before the threat arrives. It's a community-wide immune response. This challenges our entire conception of a forest as a collection of individual competing organisms. Instead, it suggests a forest is a highly complex, cooperative and intelligent system. It operates less like a battleground and more like a single interconnected organism, with the fungal network acting as its nervous system. Does this interconnectedness, this ability to share resources and information, hint at a form of collective consciousness? If a tree can feel the distress of its neighbor through this shared underground web, where does the self of one tree end and the self of another begin? Think of this vast hidden network beneath your feet, a silent, ancient and wise intelligence, holding the entire forest in a complex and caring embrace. Let's zoom in now, from the scale of the entire forest to the microscopic molecular level within a single plant. We've talked about plants sending distress signals, but how do they do it? The mechanism is eerily familiar. It involves a molecule that plays a starring role in our own nervous system, glutamate. In animals, glutamate is the most important excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. It is fundamental for learning, memory, and the transmission of nerve signals. When one neuron wants to send a message to another, it releases glutamate into the synapse, the tiny gap between them, which then activates the receiving neuron. In a stunning example of convergent evolution, plants have harnessed the very same molecule for their own long-distance, rapid-fire communication. When a plant leaf is wounded, the damaged cells release a pulse of glutamate into the plant's vascular system. This glutamate binds to specialized glutamate receptors on the surfaces of other cells, which are remarkably similar to the glutamate receptors found in our own brains. The activation of these receptors triggers the opening of ion channels, causing an influx of calcium ions into the cells. This creates a wave of calcium that propagates from cell to cell, carrying the signal. This calcium wave, in turn, generates a slow-moving electrical wave, the action potential we mentioned earlier. This entire chain reaction, wound, glutamate release, calcium wave, electrical signal, is how a plant can tell its entire body about a localized injury. A signal that starts in a single leaf on a tomato plant can, within minutes, reach the roots, telling them to start absorbing different nutrients and the other leaves, telling them to start producing defensive compounds. It is a full-body response, coordinated by a system that, at a molecular level, bears a striking resemblance to the neural communication in animals. This is not to say that a plant has a brain or nerves. It does not. But it has independently evolved a sophisticated signaling toolkit using the same chemical building blocks. It is a testament to the elegant efficiency of nature. Why reinvent the wheel if a molecule like glutamate works so perfectly for rapid signaling? The philosophical question this raises is profound. If the language of distress, at its most fundamental chemical level, is the same in a plant as it is in an animal, does that imply a shared, ancient ancestry of feeling? Or is it merely a coincidence of chemistry, a useful tool co-opted for different purposes? Does the shared vocabulary imply a shared meaning? Let this molecular dance, this silent internal conversation, soothe your mind. We have established that plants can sense and react to their environment in real time. But can they learn from past experiences? Can they form memories? The concept of a plant having a memory seems like something out of science fiction, but a series of remarkable experiments suggests that they can, in a very real, albeit non-conscious way. The star of this research is again the sensitive Mimosa pudica plant. As we know, it folds its leaves in response to touch or disturbance. This is an energy-intensive process for the plant, so ideally, it should only do it when there is a genuine threat. Scientist Monica Galliano and her team designed a clever experiment to test the plant's ability to learn. They built a device that would drop the mimosa plants from a short height, a startling but harmless event. The first few times the plants were dropped, they responded as expected. They folded their leaves. But after 5 or 6 drops, the plant's response began to change. They started to fold their leaves less and less, until eventually they stopped folding them at all. They had, in essence, learned that the dropping stimulus was not a real threat, and that it was a waste of energy to react to it. This is a classic example of habituation, a simple but fundamental form of learning and memory, where an organism learns to ignore a repeated, irrelevant stimulus. You might think that the plants were just getting tired, their folding mechanism fatigued. But the researchers tested for this. After the plants had learned to ignore the dropping, the scientists would shake them. In response to this new, different stimulus, the plants immediately folded their leaves, proving that their ability to respond was still perfectly intact. They had not become fatigued. They had specifically learned to ignore the dropping stimulus. Even more astonishingly, the plants remembered this lesson. When the researchers brought the same plants back a month later, they still remembered that the dropping was not a threat and did not fold their leaves. They had formed a long-term memory without the aid of a brain or a single neuron. The mechanism for this memory is still a mystery. It might be encoded in epigenetic changes, modifications to the DNA that alter gene activity, or perhaps in stable patterns of calcium or electrical activity within the plant's cells. But the phenomenon itself is undeniable. A plant can learn, and a plant can remember. Is a memory still a memory if there is no mind to reminisce? Does the ability to learn and retain information, even at this simple level, imply a form of sentience we have yet to recognize? Let us pause our scientific journey for a moment and float into the more abstract waters of philosophy and ethics. We have explored the deep and complex sensory world of plants. They can sense touch, see light, smell danger, taste the soil, hear vibrations, and even learn and remember. They communicate in complex chemical languages and form cooperative communities. Knowing all of this, how does it change our relationship with them? What is the moral weight, if any, of this knowledge? Consider the simple act of mowing a lawn. We have learned that the smell of cut grass is a chemical scream, a warning to other plants. When we mow, we are inflicting millions of wounds, triggering a massive coordinated distress response across an entire field of organisms. We do not do it out of malice, of course. We do it for aesthetics, for recreation. But does understanding the biological reality of the act change its ethical dimension? If we knew for certain that plants were suffering in a way we could understand, would we still do it? And if we wouldn't, what would our parks and gardens look like? This line of questioning can lead us to uncomfortable but important places. For many, vegetarianism or veganism is an ethical choice rooted in the desire to minimize the suffering of sentient beings, specifically animals who we know have nervous systems and the capacity to feel pain. But if plants possess such a deep and intricate awareness of their world and can react to harm in such a sophisticated manner, does that complicate this ethical framework? This is not an argument against vegetarianism, but rather an invitation to deepen the philosophical inquiry. Perhaps the core ethical issue is not the simplistic binary of pain versus no pain, but a broader spectrum of respect for all life. Perhaps the lesson from the secret life of plants is one of humility. It reminds us that sentience and intelligence can take forms we are only just beginning to comprehend. It asks us to reconsider our place in the web of life, not as masters of a dead, unfeeling world, but as one sensing, communicating species among a multitude of others. What does it mean to live respectfully alongside these silent sensing beings? Does it mean we should never harm a plant? That is likely impossible, as we depend on them for food, shelter, and the very air we breathe. Perhaps instead it calls for a shift in attitude, from one of casual consumption to one of conscious gratitude, to recognize the life that is given to sustain our own. There are no easy answers here. Let these questions simply wash over you without the need for a solution. Let them be a part of the mystery that cradles you as you drift. We have touched upon the idea of plant intelligence, but let us now face it directly. What do we even mean by intelligence? Our definition is often deeply biased, centered on the things that we, as humans, do well: abstract thought, complex language, tool use. We define intelligence by the presence of a brain. But what if this is a profound failure of imagination? What if intelligence can take other forms? The plant offers us a radical alternative, a model of decentralized or distributed intelligence. A plant has no central command center. There is no single organ making all the decisions. Instead, intelligence is distributed throughout its entire body. Every root tip is a small processing center, sensing the soil and making growth decisions. Every leaf is a sensory organ, monitoring the light environment and detecting threats. The entire plant operates as a collective, a swarm intelligence similar to an ant colony or a flock of birds. The decisions made by the plant, when to flower, where to grow its roots, whether to fight or conserve energy, emerge from the complex interplay of millions of local sensing and signaling events. Consider the problem-solving ability of a simple pea plant. It needs to find something to climb. It cannot see the trellis across the garden, so it employs a strategy of exploration and exploitation. It grows its tendrils in a sweeping circular motion. Most of these explorations will find nothing. They are failures, but eventually one tendril will make contact. When it does, the plant fundamentally changes its behavior. It stops wasting energy on random exploration and concentrates its resources, its growth, on coiling around and strengthening its hold on the support it has found. This is a classic computational problem of balancing searching with finding, and the plant solves it elegantly without a single neuron. It is a physical embodiment of a sophisticated algorithm. Does this form of embodied, decentralized intelligence deserve the same respect we give to the centralized, brain-based intelligence of animals? Perhaps we need to broaden our definition of intelligence itself. Perhaps it is not about thinking, but about the ability to adaptively and successfully navigate a complex and changing world. By that definition, plants, which have been thriving on this planet for hundreds of millions of years, are masters of intelligence. Let go of your preconceived notions. Allow your mind to be as flexible and adaptive as the life forms we are considering. When a plant is attacked, it does not simply sit there and endure the damage. It fights back, and its weapons are not teeth or claws, but a mastery of biochemistry that would make a human pharmacist envious. Every plant is a chemical factory of staggering complexity, capable of producing thousands of different compounds. Many of these are secondary metabolites, chemicals not essential for the plant's basic day-to-day survival, but which serve specialized purposes, chief among them being defense. Let's look at some of these chemical weapons. When an insect begins to chew on a leaf, many plants will flood their tissues with tannins. These are bitter compounds that bind to proteins in the insect's digestive system, making the leaf difficult to digest and an unappetizing meal. Other plants produce potent neurotoxins. The tobacco plant, for example, produces nicotine, a powerful insecticide that paralyzes and can kill many of the insects that try to eat it. The coffee plant produces caffeine, not just to give us a morning boost, but to inhibit the growth of competing seedlings and to harm predatory insects. Some plant defenses are even more insidious. Certain plants, when damaged by a caterpillar, will release voces that not only call for parasitic wasps, as we've discussed, but that can also mimic the scent of a female moth. This can attract male moths to the plant, who will lay their eggs only for the newly hatched caterpillars to find themselves on a leaf that is now primed and ready with its chemical defenses. The plant is not just defending itself. It is actively setting traps. Plants can produce medicinal compounds that we ourselves have co-opted. The bark of the willow tree contains salicin, the precursor to aspirin. The plant uses it to fight off its own infections, a kind of plant-based immune response. The beautiful foxglove plant produces digitalis, a compound that can be a deadly poison, but, in controlled doses, is a powerful heart medication. The plant is its own doctor, constantly monitoring its health and synthesizing the chemical responses it needs to heal itself and fight off pathogens. This ability to create such a vast and targeted arsenal of chemicals in response to specific threats is a form of intelligence. It requires sensing the attacker, identifying it, and then initiating the correct chemical production line to counter it. It is a silent, invisible, but incredibly high-stakes war, fought on a molecular battlefield. Imagine this hidden world of chemical complexity, a world of poisons, medicines, and cries for help, all happening in the quiet stillness of a single leaf. One of the greatest barriers to our understanding and empathizing with plants is our vastly different experience of time. We live our lives in a whirl of seconds, minutes, and hours. Our consciousness is a fast-flowing river of thoughts and sensations. For a plant, life operates on a much slower timescale. Its actions, growing towards light, sending out a root, opening a flower, can take hours, days, or even weeks. To our frenetic perception, they appear to be doing nothing. They seem static, passive objects. But what if we could shift our perception to plant time? This is what time-lapse photography allows us to do. When we watch a time-lapse video of a plant, its world is revealed to be as dynamic, active, and responsive as our own. We see bean sprouts bursting from the soil and dancing as they orient themselves. We see flowers opening and closing with the rhythm of the day. We see tendrils actively exploring their environment, and we see plants competing for light, jostling for position in a slow-motion battle. In their own time frame, plants are constantly in motion, constantly behaving. This difference in temporal perception is crucial to our central question. The signals that we have been discussing, the calcium waves and electrical potentials, are also much slower in plants than the nerve impulses in animals. An animal nerve impulse is measured in milliseconds. A plant's electrical signal travels in centimeters per minute. To a plant, this speed is perfectly adequate. It doesn't need to flee from a predator in a split second. Its threats, like a growing shadow from a neighbor or a slowly spreading fungal infection, operate on a slower timescale, and so its responses are calibrated accordingly. So, if a plant were to have a subjective experience, a form of consciousness, it would likely be a consciousness that operates on this radically different timescale. It would be a slow, diffuse, and deliberate awareness, an experience where the passing of a single day might feel like a single breath. This is, perhaps, the ultimate philosophical challenge in trying to understand plant life. We are trying to comprehend a form of being whose very experience of existence might be stretched out over a timescale we can barely imagine. Can we truly say that a being doesn't feel just because it feels at a speed we cannot perceive? As you lie here, feel your own sense of time begin to slow down. Feel the seconds stretch out. Imagine a consciousness that experiences the rising and setting of the sun as a single fleeting event. Allow yourself to drift into the deep, slow time of the plant world. We have journeyed far. We have seen that plants possess a remarkable awareness of their world, a form of nociception. They detect injury and respond with complex, defensive, and communicative actions. They can learn, remember, and problem-solve. But now we must return to the second and most critical part of our original definition of pain, the subjective, emotional experience of suffering. And this brings us inescapably to the missing piece of the puzzle, the brain. In humans and other vertebrate animals, the experience of pain is not generated at the site of the injury. The burn on your finger does not, in itself, contain the feeling of pain. That feeling is constructed, interpreted, and experienced within the brain. Specifically, it involves regions like the thalamus, which acts as a relay station for sensory information, the somatosensory cortex, which maps the location and intensity of the stimulus, and, most importantly, the limbic system, including the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex, which imbues the sensation with negative emotional weight. It is this neural architecture that creates the anguish, the fear, the unpleasantness that is the hallmark of pain. Pain, as an experience, is a product of consciousness. And as far as we currently understand, consciousness as we know it is an emergent property of a highly complex, centralized nervous system. Plants do not have this architecture. They have no brain, no limbic system, no cortex. While their signaling systems are analogous to ours in some ways, using glutamate, calcium, and electrical waves, their structure is fundamentally different. It is decentralized. There is no central processing unit to integrate all of this sensory information into a single, unified, subjective experience. There is no anatomical location where the feeling of being eaten could reside. Therefore, by the strictest neurobiological definition, plants cannot feel pain in the way that we or other animals do. They lack the biological hardware required for the emotional experience of suffering. This may feel like a definitive and perhaps disappointing conclusion, but it is not the end of the story. To say that plants do not feel pain as we do is not the same as saying their experience is meaningless, or that they are mere automatons. They possess a form of life and awareness that is profoundly other. They have a subjectivity, a point of view that is alien to us, built on a foundation of distributed intelligence and slow chemical consciousness. To simply project our own brain-centric definition of pain onto them might be a failure of empathy, not an expression of it. The question is not, do they feel pain like a human? But rather, what is the nature of a plant's experience of damage? The answer is that we do not, and perhaps cannot, fully know. And in that mystery, there is room for immense respect and wonder. One of the most intriguing and mysterious areas of this research involves a class of chemicals we normally associate with hospital operating rooms, anesthetics. Chemicals like ether, lidocaine, and other general anesthetics work on animals and humans by temporarily blocking the transmission of signals in the nervous system, effectively shutting down consciousness and the sensation of pain. They interact with ion channels and glutamate receptors in our neurons. Now, for a thought experiment, what would happen if you exposed a plant to these same chemicals? If a plant is just a simple machine, a collection of mindless reflexes, then these anesthetics, which target neural components that plants don't have, should have no effect. But they do. In a series of astonishing experiments, scientists have shown that general anesthetics can anesthetize plants. When a Venus flytrap is exposed to ether, it becomes unresponsive. You can touch its trigger hairs and it will not snap shut. Its ability to generate and transmit the electrical action potential required for the trap to close has been temporarily silenced. When the anesthetic wears off, the plant returns to normal, its sensitivity fully restored. This effect has been demonstrated in other plants as well. The experiment with the dropping Mimosa pudica was repeated, but this time the plants were exposed to an anesthetic. They stopped responding, not because they had learned, but because their signaling pathways were chemically blocked. Even the simple germination of seeds and the growth of roots can be halted by anesthetic agents. This is deeply puzzling and profound. It tells us that the very same molecules that can switch off consciousness in a human being can also switch off the responsive, signaling actions in a plant. Why? The likely answer brings us back to those fundamental building blocks. The anesthetic chemicals are probably interacting with the same targets in both plants and animals, the ion channels, the glutamate receptors, the basic machinery of electrochemical signaling that, through convergent evolution, both kingdoms have come to rely on. It does not prove that the plant has a consciousness that is being switched off, but it does show, on a deep molecular level, that the mechanisms of action and awareness in plants are far more analogous to our own than we ever imagined. It suggests that life, in its quest to sense and respond, has discovered a set of universal principles. The line between the animal and the plant kingdoms, which once seemed so clear and distinct, becomes ever more blurry and fascinating. We have arrived at a point where a simple yes or no answer to our question seems increasingly inadequate. The evidence shows that plants have a form of nociception, but lack the brain architecture for pain as we define it. Perhaps the problem lies in the question itself, by asking, can plants feel pain? And we are trying to fit their existence into a box that was designed for ours. We are asking if they can speak our sensory language. A more fruitful and humbling approach might be to consider the possibility of a spectrum of sentience. Sentience isn't a simple on or off switch. It is a gradient. At one end, you might have the simple chemotaxis of a bacterium moving towards food and away from poison, a basic rudimentary awareness. Further along the spectrum, you have an insect with a more complex nervous system, capable of learning, navigation, and social behavior. Further still, you have mammals with their rich emotional lives, social bonds, and capacity for what we call suffering. We, as humans, with our self-awareness and abstract thought, reside somewhere along this spectrum as well. Where, then, do we place plants? Historically, we have placed them at the very beginning, barely a step above inert matter. But the science we have explored tonight suggests this is a profound error. Given their ability to sense, communicate, learn, and remember, they clearly belong somewhere meaningful on this spectrum. Their form of sentience is simply different from ours. It is a non-neural, decentralized chemical sentience, a distributed consciousness. It is a form of being that is deeply alien to our own, but no less valid for its otherness. To say that plants do not feel pain is likely true, by our definition. But to say they do not have a meaningful experience of their own existence, a form of awareness that values integrity and fears destruction, might be an act of profound arrogance. Their experience of a wound from a caterpillar is not pain, but it is a complex, information-rich event that involves detection, signaling, chemical defense, and communication. It is a negative state that the organism actively works to avoid and mitigate. What shall we call this state? We lack the vocabulary because we have never before had to consider the inner life of a being so different from ourselves. Acknowledging this spectrum allows us to hold two seemingly contradictory ideas at once. Plants do not feel pain as we do, and they are sentient, aware beings who deserve our respect and consideration. This nuanced view doesn't provide easy answers, but it opens the door to a richer, more compassionate, and more scientifically honest understanding of the living world. Let us zoom out one last time, from the individual plant, from the forest community to the entire planet. As we consider the interconnectedness of all plant life, the airborne chemical conversations, the subterranean fungal networks, we begin to touch upon a grand and beautiful idea known as the Gaia hypothesis. Proposed by scientist James Lovelock, this hypothesis suggests that we can view the entire Earth, including all its living organisms, its atmosphere, its oceans, and its soils, as a single, self-regulating superorganism. In this view, the planet's biosphere, dominated by plant life, actively maintains the conditions necessary for its own survival. Plants, through photosynthesis, regulate the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Their transpiration releases vast quantities of water vapor, influencing weather patterns and creating clouds that reflect sunlight and cool the planet. The chemical and physical processes of life are not just happening on the Earth. They are actively shaping and managing the Earth's climate and chemistry, creating a complex feedback loop that keeps the planet's systems in a state of relative stability, a state conducive to life. The interconnected communication networks we have discussed are the nervous system of this planetary organism. The Wood Wide Web is not just a local network. It is a continental-scale network. The volatile organic compounds released by a forest in the Amazon can travel on the wind and influence cloud formation and rainfall hundreds of miles away. The health of the vast phytoplankton blooms in the ocean, which are a form of microscopic plant life, profoundly affects the global carbon cycle. Everything is connected. When we look at the Earth from this perspective, the question of individual plant sentience becomes part of a much larger tapestry. The awareness is not just in the single leaf or the single tree, but it is an emergent property of the entire interconnected planetary system. Is it possible that the Earth itself is in some way sentient? A vast, slow consciousness, with the forests as its lungs, the oceans as its circulatory system, and the web of life as its mind. This is a philosophical leap, of course, but it is one that is grounded in the scientific reality of a deeply interconnected and self-regulating world. As you lie here, feel yourself as a part of this system. Feel your breath connecting you to the trees. Feel the gentle pull of the planet's gravity. You are not just on the Earth. You are a part of Gaia. We have journeyed through the science, the philosophy, and the grand cosmic perspective. We have wrestled with complex questions and sat with the beauty of mystery. So, what do we do with this knowledge in our daily lives? How do we move forward? The answer is perhaps not a radical change in our actions, but a profound change in our awareness. The ultimate lesson from the inner world of plants may be a call for a deeper sense of gratitude and mindful coexistence. When you eat a salad, you can do so with a new appreciation for the complex life you are consuming. You can be grateful for the light, the water, and the soil that the plant transformed into nourishment. You can acknowledge that for you to live, another form of life has ceased to be, and you can hold that fact with respect rather than indifference. When you walk in a park or a forest, you can see it not as a static, green backdrop for your own activities, but as a bustling, vibrant community. You can know that the air you are breathing is filled with invisible conversations, and that the ground beneath your feet is thrumming with a shared intelligence. This shift in perception changes everything. It elevates the mundane to the miraculous. This perspective can also guide our larger, collective actions. It can encourage us to support agricultural practices that work with the intelligence of plants, like permaculture and regenerative farming, which honor the importance of soil health and biodiversity. It can deepen our resolve to protect old-growth forests, recognizing them not just as collections of trees, but as ancient, wise communities, reservoirs of irreplaceable biological and perhaps even conscious knowledge. It can inspire us to bring more plant life into our homes and our cities, not just as decoration, but as a way of reconnecting with the non-human world, of inviting a different, quieter form of being into our frenetic lives. We do not need to feel guilty for our existence as heterotrophs, as beings who must consume other life to survive. That is the nature of the web of life, but we can choose to participate in that web with grace, with awareness, and with a profound sense of gratitude. We can be better partners in the Gaian system. This is the ultimate gift of our inquiry. The question, can plants feel pain, leads us not to a simple answer, but to a more beautiful and responsible way of living on this planet. It asks us to be better gardeners, not just in our backyards, but in the world at large. And so, our journey together comes to a close. We began with a simple question, and we found a world of immense complexity, a world of silent sensation, subtle communication, and a form of intelligence so different from our own that it challenges the very definition of the word. We have learned that plants are not passive objects, but active, dynamic, and aware subjects in their own right. They navigate a rich sensory world of light, touch, chemistry, and vibration. They remember their past and prepare for their future. They form communities, share resources, and warn each other of danger. We have concluded, with a degree of scientific confidence, that they do not feel pain as we do. They lack the brain that is necessary for the emotional experience of suffering. But we have also discovered that this conclusion, far from diminishing them, opens us up to the possibility of a different kind of sentience, a distributed, non-conscious awareness that is no less wondrous. The question itself has served as a doorway, leading us into a deeper appreciation for the mystery and majesty of all life. Now, it is time to let these thoughts go. Let them dissolve like mist in the morning sun. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing to remember. Allow your mind to become as still and quiet as the sleeping forest. Feel the gentle rhythm of your own breath, the slow and steady beat of your own heart. You are a part of this living world, a part of its great breathing system. You are safe. You are supported, and it is time to rest. Let my voice fade away, and let the gentle ambient sounds carry you now, all the way into a deep and peaceful sleep. Rest well, dream well,